This video is going to be about the use gel option in the Light Lab. Before getting into that, what I'm going to do is turn the atmosphere off and set it to fully black and turn the Bryce sun off, just so that we're in a position where there's no other light sources, and it'll make it clear what's going on, or hopefully it'll make it clearer what's going on. Okay, so on the create shelf I'm going to create a square spotlight. So that's a square spotlight, and lift it up above my object, and you can just see that it's a fairly faint outline on the ground there. If I squash this a little bit, so just squash it out, it'll spread it out a bit more on the floor, and then I can go in and edit it. And what I want to do is introduce an image. The image, I had a quick look on the internet and found an image of a stained glass window and just cropped it out in PaintShop Pro and saved it as a JPEG. So if I go to use gel and click on image and then click on an empty square, it opens this little dialog that allows me to navigate to where my image is, and then I can load it in. If while you're doing this you by accident click outside that window, it might seem that Bryce is locked up and you can't do anything, but the only reason that's happening is because the window's still open, but it's underneath what you can now see. So if you hit Alt Tab on PC at least and reselect the application, you can then open that and just load it in. So it's loaded in. This is a diffuse channel, this is the alpha channel. We don't need to worry about the alpha channel in this case. I'm just going to use the diffuse component of the image. So it's just alpha white. So I'll just check out of there, and you can see in the preview here that if I go for render in scene, that the output of this particular light source is rather faint. We've got linear fall off, which means that the further away from the light source you get, the dimmer the light's going to be, and these options relate to what happens there. So if you have none, the light doesn't fall off. The intensity of the light is only then dependent on the angle of the geometry that it's falling on. Linear fall off, you'll need a bit more light output. Squared fall off even more so, and it falls off more rapidly. And ranged gives you this option, but really that's beside the point. We're talking about the gel option. So I'll just set this down to a reasonable value and check out of here, and you can see the effect we have. So it has projected the image from the light source onto the object. Now, probably the most difficult thing to get your head around with respect to the gel lights is the way that, if we go into here now, the mapping mode, you see, even though we clicked on the image to load it in, it still is sort of a material. So you click on procedural and you can see we've got into the material lab, and even though this is an image, all these mapping modes relate to the way that image is projected from the geometry that represents the light source in the wireframe view. That's a bit of a weird concept. So to help explain that, what I can do is I can swap this, which is essentially a pyramid, for if I go to the edit shelf, that's the one option I want here. This allows to convert selection to. If I swap it to the cone, which represents our round spotlight, then when this gets projected out, suddenly it's not like a flat sheet of in front of the light source projecting out. It's being affected by the geometry from which it's projected. That's a bit odd, but when you load in the light sources, they choose an appropriate mapping mode for you. So if we go to this now and go into procedural, which is just going into the material lab essentially, we're on parametric. But if you were to load the light source to stop with, you'd get some kind of object mode here, which would bring you back to a more sensible form of projection. So that's just something to be aware of. If you start swapping these light sources around, then you might get some weird effects. So let's create that light source then from scratch. So we go to create spotlight. There you go, that's the same object that we had a moment ago, and squish it down and go to edit and go into use gel and go image and get this image. Just select it, check out, and then increase the light output. It's looking good in the preview, not all distorted. And if we go into procedural here, which essentially takes us into the material lab, you can see it's got objects top selected, which was the appropriate choice for this particular object. But there are other options, just be aware of that. So we can do, say, spherical mapping, which maybe not the most appropriate choice for this particular light source, but you get a different effect, so that wouldn't really be suitable for this image. So let's do something that's suitable for this image. Let's create a different light source, go to the parallel light. Now the normal parallel light, as opposed to the Bryce 7.1 parallel light, the square parallel light, is that this light source behaves as a point light source trapped in a box, whereas this one is a genuine parallel light where all the light arrives parallel, like I suppose a laser would. So if I go to, well, I can go into the material option for this light source just as easily as I can go into the options via the light lab, but you'd probably need to understand a bit more about the way materials work if you're going to take that route, so probably best stick with this until you get used to it. So if we check in procedural now, which takes us into the material lab for the option, you can see we've got a parametric map, and we'll take the output up, and what else did we do last time? I think that was probably it. Oh yes, I've not lifted it up, so that's why you can't see it in the preview. So I'll lift it up, and you can see it's only projecting a very small square on there. So if we increase the light source, you can see now how it works as a parallel light. There we go. And supposing, like, you'd very rarely have a window unless it was in the roof from that angle, so what you can do is tilt it over, and then we can rotate it. So I'm just rotating it around, but just keeping it pointed at the object. Here we go, more or less, I think. Right, lower it down, move it around, and then you can have this sort of effect as if the object was in a room with a stained glass window, and you're projecting onto it the image of the stained glass window in such a way that it looks like light is coming through the window. So if I had this set up probably with some other light sources to provide a bit of ambient lighting for this scene, then that might be quite a convincing effect. So if I wanted to very easily improve the lighting for this, I could give ourselves sort of a grey background here, go into image-based lighting, use HDR image, use sky dome only, and use sky, and just get a grey dome there. The sunlight's automatically disabled anyway when you deal with HDRs when you load them in, but I'm checking that's the same. Do a render in scene, and then set the quality down and just provide a bit of general lighting from this of an appropriate low level. So let's say 25, right, maybe 35. Okay, and then if I check out of here now, I'll just set my sky to fully black again. We can have an integration between the light source and some general lighting to provide a bit of information in that shadow area, for example. So that's sort of a very basic introduction to what you might do with a gel light, but you could do quite a lot more than that. As I say, the way that they behave is very much dependent on how you set things up here with the mapping mode, and what the light source is. So we have on our create shelf here some more exotic types of light source. Like for example, let's have a look at the distant light. So what I shall do is go back into the image based lighting and just set the output to 0. So we're back into no other light source situation except this light source that I've created there, which I'm now getting rid of. So now back to fully black again. I'm going to create one of the distant light sources, and this should help explain how you can have the light coming from one direction but the mapping mode coming from the object. So if you like, this is not the light source, this is a controller for the light source now. So if I just lift this up here, you can't see any difference wherever I put this. So I'm going to set it off to one side, for example. It's not really affecting where the shadow falls. The shadow's falling from wherever this is telling it to fall. So I'm going to set this at a specific location so I can find it. So let's say 500 on the y-axis, and it's just above the object somewhere. There you go, there it is. And then we're going to go into this and have a look at some of the properties of our distant light source. So I'll edit this now. You can control where the distant light source falls with this roller ball, but if you check out, it has a bad habit of resetting itself back to the position it started with. So even if I place it underground, which will make it very clear that it's reset itself, it's popped back up again. So to overcome that minor issue, which can be a bit of an irritation, I found you can just lock it in place with a keyframe on the animation tab there. So because all the sky options are, well, as far as I know, actually I don't know very much about animation, but I know that quite a lot of options are animatable. One is the position of the sun. You can lock it in place with a keyframe, and then it'll mean that it stays pinned there and you don't have this problem with it floating around. Now I'm going to apply a spherical map to this. So somewhere, I'll just have a quick look for it. Okay. Hur and I have been working on some of these high resolution terrains that he's made, and I've been providing materials and working on some of the lighting for, and I used the spherical mapper, which is a product that Hur and I have released, to produce a high resolution spherical map of one of the terrains, just for the purposes of this demonstration, because I thought it looked rather nice, and a bit of advertising in there. So okay, right, what I'll go is edit it, go use image, use gel rather, then select image, then open up this spherical map image. There we go. Check out of there. Right, because I was using a distant light source, it's already chosen parametric as a mapping mode. But in this case, unlike with the square projection, like spotlight, square spotlight, right? Parametric is a square output. Because the distant light source as the placeholder for it is a sphere, parametric produces a spherical map. The difference between the spherical mapping and the parametric mapping is a rotation of 90 degrees from the point of its origin. So here, so it just depends where the edge starts. So if you find things around 90 degrees out of alignment when you're doing this sort of operation, just see if you can swatch between parametric and spherical, and that might solve it for you. Anyway, as you can see in the preview, interesting things are happening. So I'll give this a quick render. There you go. So this spherical map that's projected from the distant light source, if it really was projecting from a sunlight light source so far away, the resolution would be spread out so much that you'd just see pixels. So what's happening here is, although the light source is treated as being distant, I don't know, its origin of projection is associated with this light source here. So let's see, if I move this around, its projection origin moves accordingly, which is a bit strange but useful for certain effects. So I'll pop this back where I was going to put it. I don't know. I was thinking to 0.0500 and right. And there's nothing special about that position. It's just I'm trying to remember it. That's all, because I'm going to do something else that involves fitting to that position. So if I create a sphere here and then position it at the same origin as the light source, there we go, and then expand that sphere, not so much that we'll get clipping the ground, we'll come to that in a second, and then move inside this sphere, you can see now everything has gone dark. So even though the point of projection is inside the sphere, the light source is outside the sphere. To solve that is easy enough. We could exclude this sphere from the light source. So if I get this distant light and edit it and exclude the sphere I've just created, that allows the light to fall inside the sphere, but the sphere remains unlit. Okay, I'm going to enlarge the sphere now so that it'll encompass our scene, and you can see what's happening now. Unlit sphere and lit ground with lit object in it. Okay, what if, alright, well, here's the idea. What if I want this to seamlessly link up with a spherical map on the sphere, which I thought, you know, was a nice idea, and covered a bit more about mapping modes, which might hopefully either help explain or confuse you as to what's going on here. So if I modify the material on the sphere and in the ambient channel pick a picture, which is my spherical map here, and then set its mapping mode, I could set it to spherical, which would be appropriate. We'll need some output in the ambient so you can see what's happening. So there you go, that's its spherical map. Oh, and I can also set it to parametric, which moves it around 90 degrees. Because the mapping mode on the light source was parametric, it seems appropriate to choose parametric for this. So I'll check out of here now and use the global ambient colour to drive that effect. And you can see now they've lined up. There's a little bit of a light difference between the output from the background, and obviously if the camera is not in exactly the right position, then there's going to be some changes in the effect because of the geometry, but you can see where we're going with this now. So if I modify the output of the light source, not that one, the light source which I'd left up here somewhere, there we go, distant light, edit that and increase or decrease accordingly. So let's try 23 for that. I don't need any specular output, and then give that a quick render. It's still a bit bright, so I need to reduce this a bit more. So let's try taking it down to 15. Maybe it's still a bit bright, but we'll try that. Okay, it's getting close now, so I'll edit this a little bit further. Okay, this is a bit of a fiddly bit, but there you go. So you can see now, or rather you can't see now very easily. I'll just rotate the camera around so I can try and find somewhere else there might be a junction between the two bits. That somewhere here or there, I'm not sure, so it's working. If I widen the field of view, then you'll see a bit more of what's going on. That we've now got the projected light falling on my object, and that's casting a shadow, but it's the colour of the projection background, and the background neatly fitted in with that ground plane. So it looks like the object is in the scene, but obviously there's a slight issue here, because if I get my object selected there and enlarge it a bit, move it across so it's on this land, and then lift it up so it's on the ground, so there we go, you can see that it's receiving the light that's got the image wrapped around it. So okay, this allows me to introduce another little concept here. So if I get my light source, my distant light source, and go Control C and Control V, I now have two distant light sources there. I'll give this one a different family allocation just so I can pick it out easily. In fact, if I make it larger, it doesn't matter about the size of it, it won't affect the projection. Then I'm projecting that image twice. So just zoom in here so you can see there's the initial light source that's projecting it for the first time. Here's the second one. If I go to this light source and enter a negative value for the diffuse, I can pull all the light away from that I projected from my object and from the ground. So maybe that doesn't seem very useful at this point, but if I now edit this so that that subtracted light is only on, say, my group, then because of the problem with the selection process, the include exclude won't work with groups. So you just have to bear that in mind when you're doing this, that you might have to think in reverse. So if I exclude the sphere and the plane and leave the group selected, so if I exclude the sphere and the plane, that's the same as including just the group. And what that allows me to do is pull the light off the surface of my object. So I've projected the light out and now I've lifted the light up. And then what I can do is go to my light source, my initial one here, and copy and paste it again. I'll make that again a bit bigger. You don't have to make it any bigger, it's just so you can see that I've got different light sources here, that's all. I'll give it a different colour, okay, in the family group. So this is my new light source, and I'll edit that one, and instead of using a gel, I'll just switch that option off and provide white light, and then I shall just have that shining on the object that I want to light. So if I'm excluding the plane now, and then check out of here, what you have is the object lit with white light, so it's not receiving the pattern, and the shadow is generated by the projection, but the projection is being pulled off the surface of the model. Obviously the reason for moving the light source first and in the light lab and then doing the copy and pasting is that you can get these all out of sync if you start adjusting the position of this light source. So if we go to the first light source here, for example, well, another thing to consider before I get onto this just final little bit is if you turn the shadow intensity down, it'll look like a bit of light's getting around from the environment to other places. So if I turn that down to 35, just see the effect of that in the shadow region there, then you can see a bit of the ground. Obviously, because this is being projected onto a flat surface, the shadows can't respond to the changes in the geometry of the terrain. It's just an illusion. So there is that. And the other thing is that, as I was about to point out, if I now edit the position of this light source and then lock it in position with that's it, there's just a little keyframe there, then things will go a bit out of sync because it's no longer being lifted off by a light source in exactly the same position. So it's rather reliant. I don't think I can go back because I added a keyframe to the original position. So it is rather reliant on all the alignments being good, because each one is projecting from specific places with this. So the main light source won't matter, but you've got to remember the pattern, as I was explaining, is being projected as a result from the centre of the object that is its placeholder. So you can really break this if you wanted to. So there you go. I thought that was an interesting thing to do with gel lights, and hopefully by playing with these things then you'll get an idea of the mechanics involved. So I think that's it for now. If you want to know any more about gel lights or have got any feedback about the video, then please feel free to put it in the comments. Cheers now.